In this podcast, I'm going to be talking about the first ever conventional setup you should have if you are looking for your first ever conventional setup and what it will be used for. So let's get into it. Excuse me, guys. All right, there we go. So this setup is more or less what I'm going to be covering. What I'm going to be covering is a universal first ever bait fishing setup, one that you could use for throwing cut bait, live bait, just an all-around good bait setup, and essentially one that you could use from the shore and from the boat. Because I'm assuming if you're buying your first ever conventional setup, you don't go that often on boat trips that you would specifically need a specific conventional setup for, i.e., like if you're basically, or for example, if you're basically fishing like offshore for like red snapper, or if you're fishing for yellowtail, which mostly is done on a boat, those are very specific setups. This is a setup that you can use regardless. So this right here is going to be, so like I said, all-around bait fishing setup. First things first that you're going to need for your all-around shore and sport boat setup is you're going to need you are going to need your rod. What are the specs of the rod that you're going to want? You are first going to want a 7-foot, 7'2", somewhere in there. Not a rocket science. You want something that's easy enough to move around with, but at the same time is long enough to where it has proper hook setting abilities and also you can make decent casts with. You're not going to need an 8 or 9 foot as some people would use, like say a jig stick, because we're not getting into lure fishing. We're getting into strictly bait fishing. So that is your rod, 7, maybe 7.5 foot at the longer end, for just an all-around rod. Because you also want it to be decently close to you for bottom fishing as well. So 7 foot, probably a good setup. And to go with it, you're going to want a reel that can handle. Let me clarify one other thing with the rod. Should be good for 30-pound line. So like 20 to 50, 20 to 40, somewhere in there. This one I have on here is technically a casting rod, but it is 25 to 40. Because I'll explain why in just a minute in the line test, that the reason for that. Next up, you're going to need a reel. Reels should have 250, 300 yards of whatever line you're going to throw on there. For our case, since I'm going to be recommending 30-pound mono, 200 to 300 yards of 30-pound mono. With that, the reason for that is if you're fishing up and down, if you're fishing vertically, doesn't make that much of a difference because you either break off the fish in the structure or you land him. It's one or the other. You're not going to need long fights. You're not going to take long runs. But if you're fishing from the shore, a lot of the time, the techniques you'll use a clicker on the side of your reel. So, fewfold. You're going to have a fish that will pull out line when the clicker goes. You're going to have him eat a little more as you're going to put on free spool when he eats the bait. So that's the first reason why you need a lot of line. Second, you don't know how much line he's going to take just during the fight. And on top of that, you don't know how deep the water is going to be. So those are just a couple different factors of why you're going to want that much line. Also, really long cast. Sometimes you're going to want to make a decent sized cast if you're, say, trying to fish in the surf. With that being said, those are all good reasons for having that much line on a rod. And to go with that, you are now going to have, so rod, reel, now your line. Line's going to be a straight 30-pound mono. Reason being is conventional reels are the gas guzzlers of the excuse me, why am I blanking so much? Conventional reels are the gas guzzlers of the fishing reel world. What I mean by that, it's kind of like the truck that takes a lot of gasoline. Same idea. Because if your reel can hold 250 yards of 30-pound mono, imagine how much braid it will take. You're looking at having 500, 600 yards of braid. That is going to be an expensive spooling every time you go ahead and spool up that reel. With mono, you're looking at 200. No, you're not looking at just a couple bucks of mono. You can buy a cheap thing of mono for $5 that will cover exactly what you're looking for. Let's see. The trilene spool is like $10. So you can probably about 2 spools out of that. So it's $5 spooling. That's not that big of a deal. And 30 pounds is an all-around good size. So that's what I'm going to get into next. 30 pound. It's not too heavy. It's not too light. It's a nice balance. It's heavy enough that it can handle the heavy sinkers if you're trying to bottom fish with it, 8-ounce and plus sinkers. It can handle double-digit fish without a problem. So if you're trying to target fish that are 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds, this reel can handle it. And there's a lot of times where just by free accident, you'll come up with the chance of trying to hook one of those. You're going to want the 30 pound to handle it. Versus 20, it gets sketchy. 15, don't even try. 15, you're probably going to get broken off. 20, you get a good spool run with it, and you might break you off somewhere in the distance. 30, you can actually hold your own, feel comfortable with the line. Versus 20, you're going to feel like you're going to be very finicky with it. So that's a couple reasons why I use 30 for this. And this is a rule regardless of what coast you're on. If you're on the Gulf, this rule will fit that. If you're on the West Coast, this rule will fit that. So that is your general setup that I would recommend. Rod, reel, and line. Terminal tackle you're going to need. If you are using this for bank fishing, you're going to need some 3/0 hooks. 3/0 hooks are great because you can, if you're on California, the West Coast, you can rig a whole body of a squid or a whole squid, and that's a great bait to use on these setups. Whole squid, it's a perfect size for a 3/0 hook. You don't need to worry about the light wire because go with the heavy wire just because it's cut bait and you don't need to worry about it. On the Gulf, that's just a shrimp hook. 3/0 hook's a perfect size for a shrimp, and that's a perfect size bait to go use for all the stuff over there. So 3/0 hook's a good all-around size. Some swivels, 70 pound or higher. 70 pound, I recommend that just because you can find it in most tackle shops before it gets, and there's not very much else that gets tougher than that. So, like in a tackle shop, like if you're just looking at a shelf, 70 pounds can be the higher end of what you're going to find. So 70 pound swivels are what I go with. And you're going to need some sort of sinker to go with that bank setup. So you're going to need a 2 to 3 ounce torpedo sinker. If you're just fishing strictly from the bank, egg sinkers for this technique work well. But I recommend torpedo just so you can use it for a couple different methods. Egg sinker is more or less niche specific. So that's bank fishing. If you're fishing off a sport boat, I'd go with maybe grab some 8-ounce sinkers as well. And it's pretty much that. Some 8-ounce sinkers would be the only difference between the bank terminal and the sport boat. Just 8, 10-ounce sinkers for the deeper, heavier current stuff. Now, so that's all the terminal stuff you're going to need. Now let's go over what you are going to use this for on both coasts. I vaguely went over this, but you're essentially going to do let me get the volume. You're essentially going to work with so on the California coast, let's start there. Bank fishing on the California coast, you are looking at fishing, you're essentially looking at bat rays, leopard sharks. You're doing a lot of your shark and ray stuff. So bat rays, leopard sharks, gray smoothhounds, shoveling those guitar fish. A lot of these fish can hit double digits easily. I've caught shoveling those guitar fish that are 20 pounds doing this exact setup on the bank. Baits that work well for this, big old chunk of a mackerel, like a head of a mackerel or a big old fillet of a mackerel. And just bodies of squid. Take off the fins. You can use those otherwise. Take off the head and the tentacles. You can use those anywhere else. Just have the body. And with that in mind, so you thread the body on, cast out there, soak it, and basically just soak, leave it the clicker on. Find a spot where you think these fish will set up, surf, harbors, anywhere like that, and just wait till that beautiful sound comes on of your clicker. So that is the technique you're going to use from the shore in California. But if you are going to fish on a sport boat, so if you're going a half day, a 3/4 day, what is this good for? First and foremost, rockfish. You're going to need something that can properly handle an 8-ounce sinker, 8-10 ounces of lead. A round bait caster 20, while 20 can technically handle it theoretically on its own, especially for a lot of the fish you're covering. 20 just, the problem is the round bait caster itself may not have enough guts and will start to break apart. I've had this happen. Versus a setup like this is a conventional setup, and it's built to be a lot tougher. So you can rig up a 8-ounce or 10-ounce sinker, and you have no problems with it. So that is the other reason. So that is the first and foremost reason. 3/0 hook, same idea. You're going to grab a whole squid. Even if they don't have it live, they'll have it fresh, dead, or frozen, and you can just do a whole body like I was talking about earlier. Just rig it all up on a dropper loop. Once you have your dropper loop, send that sucker down to the bottom, and you're trying to target a little bit bigger size fish. Fish that now, instead of being 8 inches, are now going to be a couple pounds. So at least it'll be more enjoyable. Versus if you use little strip squid hooks, like little 4 and 2 hooks, you're just going to get a bunch of little fish. It's not going to be enjoyable. Great rock fishing tip there. So, rockfish, done. Other stuff. If you're surface fishing with a sardine or squid, as I was talking about before, you can fly line it on this setup, which is why it's just an all-around bait setup. You could fly line it, fly line your sardine or squid, and while you're catching your 1 and 2 pound calicos, there's a chance you can always hook into yellowtail, white sea bass, maybe even a halibut if it feels adventurous and comes up off the bottom, or you're fishing shallow water. So there's a decent chance. So there's a possible chance that if you do hook let me put it this way. In the odd chance that you actually hook a double-digit fish while you're fishing for smaller stuff on these sport boats, you have the 30-pound gear to go handle it. Versus if you had 10 or 12 that you would use with, say, an anchovy for smaller stuff, you get spooled, you get broken off, a lot can happen. Pain in the rear. But with 30, you have the confidence of being able to land a 20-pound white sea bass or yellowtail. So that is California. Now let's zoom over to the Gulf. And in the Gulf, so you have, now I don't do a whole lot, I actually never done offshore in the Gulf, so I'm not talking about offshore, I'm talking about like a half day that you take to go inside like a channel somewhere for sport boats. But first of all, shore. That same rig, you're going to now rig it up with a whole shrimp. That's the only difference. Instead of the big squid body, you're going to rock a whole shrimp. Rig that up on 3/0 hook. Let it soak on the bottom. Black drum, redfish are your targets. Possibly even like a cow-nose ray, but I've never caught one, so I can't vouch for it. And a bunch of hardheads. Obviously a bunch of hardheads, but that's just the nature of it. It's like we have smaller rays that'll eat the big baits here in California as well. So the honest truth is you'll catch some smaller stuff regardless of what you're doing too, but that's not your intent. Your intent is to hook a 20-pound fish, which you can possibly do in the Gulf with a big black drum. But hardheads are also just good just for intermission fish, just so you catch something on a regular basis and so you have it there. It's just the way it is. Also, you can seclude. You usually get bigger hardheads just doing a whole shrimp versus a little piece of cut shrimp. So that's that. So you're getting your hardheads, red, black drum, all the good stuff with the cut bait setup soaking on the bottom. Next thing you're going to do, if you go on a half-day boat, I know there's one out of like Port A. There's a couple out of Galveston, and I know there's probably some others around the Gulf, but I don't, I'm blanking on exactly who they are. But essentially, you hop on one of these sport boats, and what's going to happen is you are, and basically, so you hop on one of these sport boats, and what is going to happen is they are fishing heavy current, especially the time I went. You are fishing heavy current, and we were using 12-ounce sinkers, which is a stupid amount of lead, but it's the way it was. And we're using cut shrimp, or just like, I keep forgetting the name of the bait fish, but cut shrimp was one of the baits we were using, so 3/0 hook was perfect. And essentially, we were doing the same thing you would do for bottom fishing in California. You make a dropper loop, you send it down to the bottom, and it's also, but there is a good purpose having 30. Down there, you hook a bunch of big gaff tops that are 2, 3, 4 pounds, but at the same time, you have a shot of hooking a 15-pound redfish or a monster, some good size overslot redfish. With that being said, in the event you do hook a good red, you are equipped on 30 versus being screwed on 10 or 12. That is where I'm going with this. So that is how to fish your first ever what to buy and how to use it. Your first ever conventional setup all around Gulf and California. So yeah, if you like this, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And make some critiques on this. Like, would you want to go 25, 40 on the pound line? You go a little bit longer on your rods, 8 or 8.5 foot? Curious, because some guys here are more surf or more inside the harbor. All right, take care, guys.